Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asaph Adonai, and once again, welcome to another edition of Asaph Cafe. And this is a weekly show where I play piano music and invited guests on. And my guest for today's segment of Asaph Cafe is Mr. John Kramer. He's our guest, and he's going to be keeping me company as we talk and play. And I'm going to start out with the familiar Burt Bacharach's This Guy's in Love with You.
That's very nice.
Thank you.
I wonder how many in our audience, or your audience, know who sang that song, or if they even know it was a vocal.
Yeah, I'll tell them in a moment, but you're right.
Brings back a lot of memories.
Yes, it does.
Very nice.
That is a fun song to play. A
Well,
lot of fun.
it's a lot of fun to listen to. Like I said, it brings back a lot of memories. Yeah.
Yes, it does. And for the younger generation who may be watching this telecast that don't know Burt Bacharach, he was a famous composer in the
Right.
1960s. And he wrote music for Herb Alpert, the famous trumpeter in the 60s, Dionne Warwick, and all those artists of that era.
Right.
So the name of this song is called This Guy's in Love with You.
Right. And Herb sang that.
Yes, he did.
And it was kind of a break in the way music was going, popular music was going during that time.
Hmm.
A lot of it was heavier, more, rock and roll.
Yeah.
And a lot of what Herb did with the Tijuana Brass was, what do I want to say, was in there. I mean, their music was the driving beat, and
Yeah.
When he sang this song, his vocal was very subdued.
Yeah, and it worked. I think
Right.
if somebody that sounded like Sinatra would have done that, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Right.
Herb Alpert, just the way he sang it and approached it, it worked for that particular song.
Right, and it was almost like he was reading poetry,
Yes, I have to agree with you on that.
and so it was nice.
But anyway, for the younger audience, if they just look it up on YouTube, I'm sure it's probably posted there. Herb
Right.
Alpert singing This Guy's in Love with You.
Right, I'm sure it is.
And that was one of his big hits. And then what I liked was he played his trumpet solo at the end of that.
Right, right.
Just repeating the verse that he had sang prior to that, so it worked.
Yeah, he led a group of musicians called the Tijuana Brass.
I don't think many people remember that, but it was some really interesting music at the time.
Right, it was.
And they used his music for a lot of the game shows, like the Dating Game with Jim Lang, and I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah, I do. I didn't remember who hosted it, so.
Yeah, Jim Lang was the host of the Dating Game, and they used to use the music of Herb Alpert throughout the game. I think it was like a theme song. Might have been the Tijuana Taxi song that they used. I don't really remember, but they used this music. They used Herb Alpert's music an awful lot.
Now, one thing about Burt Bacharach was he did a lot of music for movies, too.
Yes, he did. And for the African American fans out there, Dionne Warwick had taken the world by storm at that time. So
Right.
I'm sure she's still going strong after all these years, but she had some great hits. I'll Say a Little Prayer for You was one of them. Just a whole bunch of songs of that era.
Yeah, Bert wrote that one, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did. I think he wrote all those songs for all the people of that era. So that was kind of cool.
Now, isn't the song Killing Me Softly about him?
I don't know, but Roberta Flack made that song famous. In fact, let me play that for you.
Okay.
There you go, Killing Me Softly, Roberta Flack.
Now, did Diana Ross do any of songs that Bacharach wrote?
I don't know, I'm not
She
certain.
broke off from the Supremes.
That I'm not certain, but I think she started with Motown, Berry Gordy.
Well, right, she did.
They had all those groups like Smokey Robinson and the Miracles that were connected with Motown. The Jackson 5,
Right.
which people probably won't remember because when you speak of Michael Jackson, we think of the adult Michael Jackson. We forget about that child that he was when he could
Right.
scream those high notes to high heaven.
Right.
So, the Jackson 5 were connected with Motown, and Stevie Wonder, a very young Stevie Wonder too, was connected
Right.
with
And
Motown.
that's why I brought it up, because when Diana Ross got out on her own,
Mm-hmm.
her style changed.
Well, yeah, that's just part of evolving, I would think, as an artist.
Right, and I just wondered if during that time in her life, if she was involved with Burt Bacharach.
I don't know. I don't know the history of that. I think that Burt Bacharach and Motown were two different entities
They were.
in that
Oh, definitely
time
they were.
frame.
And that's why I brought it up, because I wondered if Bacharach kind of wrote music
Yeah, see, I
that
don't know.
facilitated Diana Ross's style at the time.
Yeah, see, that I don't know.
Okay.
But, speaking of Motown, they had some great hits, some great songs.
Oh, yeah.
And I assume, again, like on YouTube, you can see these early performances of the Jackson 5 and very young Michael Jackson.
Right.
All the rest of those people connected with Motown at that time.
Well, somebody else that you could see, I know you didn't pick up, is, and he's no longer with us, is Otis Redding.
Yeah, sitting on the dock of the bay.
Right.
Yes, I remember him. In fact, when I used to play in Las Vegas, and I used to play with Pat Guidry and the High Rollers when I was there. This is when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And Pat he was known for singing at the Riviera Hotel and all at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when I worked with him, he was singing at the Marina Hotel. And he used to sing that Dock of the Bay, Otis Redding Dock of the Bay. And it was just par excellent.
Yeah.
And I assume
now,
that's
can you
supposed
do
to-
that? Asaph,
I
you
can
do
play Ad. I'll give you a piece of
that?
that.
Okay, give me a piece of
Okay.
it. That's part of my musical history.
and then it had a whistle part.
Right.
Something like that.
Well,
That's not really a piano song, but
no, it's not. But the ironic thing about that song, I mean, in the words, if somebody will, get it on YouTube or whatever, the words convey the sense of loneliness and almost
yeah.
a futility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unfortunately, that was the last hit.
Yeah, last hit of Otis Redding.
Right.
Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance to see Pat Guidry, he's still performing in Las Vegas these days, and I worked for him when I was in my 20s. You can go to YouTube and look up Pity Pat Guidry, and you should be able to see all of his performances during those years when I played with him. He did Dock of the Bay and Louis Armstrong's It's a Wonderful Life, or Wonderful Day, whatever that
Wonderful
song.
World.
And, yeah, Wonderful World, and all the other songs. Pat Guidry is a fantastic singer, so if you get a chance, look him up on YouTube. I'm sure he's there. But yeah, getting back to Otis Redding, yeah, I think that was probably one of his last.
It was
songs.
his last big one on the pop charts.
Yeah.
So,
But getting back to Motown, let's have fun with Stevie Wonder.
okay, let's do that.
There you go. My Sherry Amore.
Right. Were
Stevie
you
Wonder.
put in a plug for Pat? I'll put in one for Stevie Wonder. I
Great.
saw him on the Jimmy Fallon show a couple weeks ago. And he's going to be doing a tour, and I believe it starts next month.
Okay.
And he's going to be doing songs exclusively from songs in the key of life.
Okay.
Okay, like Isn't She Beautiful,
Mhm.
and the tribute to Duke Ellington, and so that would be great to be able to see Stevie Wonder. That would be on the level like we saw Paul McCartney here in Missoula in August. I mean, he's one of the great songwriters of this era, and
Yeah. Well,
dynamic
Paul McCartney-
performer.
Yeah, Paul McCartney always has been quite the songwriter.
Right, and Stevie Wonder's on his part. He's not, in our little corner of the world, the musical world, Paul McCartney is very meaningful, but he's stretched out, beyond just, the pop.
I think he started evolving when he created the group Wings after the Beatles disbanded. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I think he started to evolve there.
Well, I think there was a lot of growth, even when the Beatles were together, and I think that's what caused the split, was that they were becoming mature artists going different ways.
Yeah. Well, that happens, I mean, they were like kids when they formed the Beatles, obviously.
Right.
And you do grow, you evolve,
Right.
Diana Ross, I think she evolved, and Michael Jackson obviously evolved.
Right.
And so on, so...
And I think that's one of the qualities of music, is that music's able to speak that profound language that doesn't have words. So it can communicate very meaningful things. And even in the scripture, in Job, chapter 38, verse 7, it talks about the angels. And the Lord refers to them as the morning stars. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. And that's at the end of the creation of earth. So we have the angels singing and shouting for joy. So, I mean, you think about a music concert now. And even going back a few hundred years ago when the great composers would had one of their symphonies performed. People would give them standing ovations and clap and shout encore.
Well, the only if you're talking about composers from the past, the one that got off to a sluggish start was Rossini, the Italian composer.
Right.
He did the William Tell Overture. There's some basic movements in that, and my understanding is when he first introduced that back in the 1800s, it wasn't well received, but then when they repeated it, the audience at that time ate it up. The Rossini Overture, it starts out, the most familiar part of that overture is the part that they use on the television show with Clayton Moore. Jay Silver here is the Lone Ranger.
Oh, yeah, right. Right.
That's not really a piano song, but again, he's about the only composer I know that got off to a sluggish start. But the rest of them had great starts in the past.
Yeah, but there's little anecdotes with all those composers, like and his name Handel, the Hallelujah chorus that's in the piece of music called Messiah.
Yeah.
Okay, which is a musical adaptation of scriptural verses from Scripture that pertain to the Lord Jesus Christ, from his birth to his death to his resurrection. Okay, and of course the Hallelujah chorus is directed at his resurrection and the joy of him raising from the dead, defeating sin. And at the end of that piece of music, it was performed at Albert Hall.
Okay.
Okay, and the king was there, and it was kind of, how do I want to say that? It wasn't forbidden, but it was considered very bad manners to stand and applaud a composer or an artist when the king was there, because you only stood for the king, because the king was, ruling by divine right, so he was considered up there, number one on the social scale. But people were so moved that they got up and applauded the piece of music. And the funny part about it is that, and I'm trying to remember the king's name, I think he was a Henry.
Yeah, there are a lot of King Henrys in
but I think he was
right?
a Henry, and he got up and applauded. I don't think it was King George. I think it was King Henry. But King Henry, or whichever one it was, he got up and he applauded also. He stood up and applauded too. So everybody got away with it, and it wasn't considered bad manners or an effrontery to the king. And with the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, he had gone deaf by that time.
Yeah, but he still wrote some great stuff.
Oh, he did. The third of his music was written while he was deaf, and
well, let's have fun with Beethoven. I'll play
Okay.
the Moonlight Sonata for you since we're
Okay.
talking about Beethoven. Let me play that in its entirety for you.
okay.
you go. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Isn't it a beautiful composition?
It really is, and we could have some real fun with it. Can you play it backwards?
No, I'm afraid not.
Well,
Probably not.
the reason I asked was McCartney and Lennon played it backwards on Abbey Road, and it became the introduction to Mean Mr. Mustard.
See, I wasn't aware of that, so
And,
I did not know that.
Yeah, McCartney played that at the concert, and it was interesting.
Well, there's a big difference between little old Asaph and Paul McCartney,
Well,
obviously.
I don't know. I don't know. You just aren't familiar with it, you know.
No, probably not.
And that's all that is. But I mean, so it shows you how the universality of music. Again, because it doesn't have the words necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
The tone of it and the tones of it and the melody of it can be used to communicate in a lot of different ways. So either forward or backwards, it's still beautiful and it still means something.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about music.
Oh yeah, that's a neat thing.
Is it lends itself to creativity.
Well, you know, I had a guest on last week, and we were talking about. I gave a flyover of music history, just a generic flyover. Basically, I mentioned the medieval period that they had, way before popular music that we know it, and then the Renaissance era, which led to the Baroque era with people like Bach, you know, and so on. And after the Baroque era came the classical period of history with Mozart and Chopin and all the rest. Piece of Claire de Lune. I like that chord. I'm gonna freeze right there. And then after the classical era, we had what was called the Romantic era, which led to the evolution of the popular music that we currently have today.
Which
so
is a blend of a lot of different music.
Yeah, and ever since the Romantic era, you know, you had people like Aaron Copland in the early 1800s, and it kind of evolved into the music we have today. And then I also mentioned around the 1940s, they had the big band music, the Harry James, Glenn Miller, Tex Beneke, all the rest, Teresa Brewer, all those people from that era. And their music was complex, even though you could dance to it.
Right.
And then when the early rock and roll music came out, you know, Buddy Holly, Big Bopper, Little Richard, and all those people started to evolve. That music was very simple in comparison to big band music, and kids ate it up.
Right.
And it changed, and the music changed.
Well, what the big band era did by, you know, I'm glad you brought them up, because what they did was they opened the door to jazz and blues.
Yeah.
Okay? And then the blues led to absorbing the folk music that was in the United States.
Oh yeah.
And then, again, like you mentioned, we had taken from, I believe, the blues, a combination of the blues, folk music, and country. We have Elvis, which is rock and roll.
Well, music just evolved ever since the Romantic era, see?
Right.
And it's just interesting, the music we have. And then, of course, the thing with history tells us that when the early rock and roll music came out, it put a lot of big band players out of work at that time. And see, I like big band music, but it was so complex in comparison to, like, you listen to Buddy Holly singing Peggy Sue.
Right.
You're a teenager. What do you think you're going to listen to? I don't think you're going to be listening to Tex Beneke or somebody. Not to pick on him, but, you know, kids just like the simple stuff. And one of my teachers, Bumps Blackwell, I studied with him when I was in my 20s. He was Little Richard's manager, Bumps Blackwell. He was my teacher.
Yeah.
And he always had a thing, KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
When you're composing, keep it simple. And that's why early rock and roll took off, because it was simple. It just had a verse, or melody as we call it, and then it had a chorus or a hook, that we call it. And it's been like that pretty much ever since.
Right. Well, also...
You're 17 years old, you just want to have a little fun.
Yeah, and you know, your keep it simple applies to the economics of it, and it's a lot easier to put up 5 guys
Oh yeah.
than 32.
And not only that, my understanding of Vegas at the time too, when club owners got to a point where they didn't want to pay for like a 15-piece orchestra when they can get a little combo.
Right. And that's what the economics.
That was part of the problem too.
Yeah.
And there was only a handful that really survived, and they had to go combos. Like Louis Armstrong was one of the rare few that survived that.
Right.
Duke Ellington survived
Right.
that, but a lot of them kind of scattered.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Well, when you have somebody like Glenn Miller dying during World War II.
Yeah, that probably didn't help matters none.
No, I mean, you took out somebody who wrote music, again, for 30, 40 people.
Right.
And them coming together was a unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they came together around Glenn, and when he's dead, I mean, you can't replace him.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, that's a generic flyover music
Right.
history, and of course we have the popular music now. And then of course in the 60s it started evolving, like I mentioned the young Sarah last week, with the British invasion.
Right.
The Association, Jim Morrison and the Doors.
He was American now.
Well, yeah, but I mean most of them came from there, and of course the Beatles.
Right. Well,
And prior to that, we had a young Sinatra too during. They had a period called the crooner years.
Right.
And Frank Sinatra dominated that in the 1940s.
Right. And then came Elvis.
Yeah.
And if you ever look at the newsreels of the time,
Mm-hmm.
the reaction to Frank Sinatra and Elvis were pretty much the same. The screaming girls, the
Yeah.
fainting girls, and then that got transferred to the Beatles.
Yeah. But to me, Frank Sinatra was probably one of the best singers of all time, in my opinion. And when I'm talking about him, I'm talking about the younger Frank Sinatra. See, in 1952, he suffered a vocal hemorrhage, from what I
Right.
understand.
Right.
And his voice changed.
Right.
It became a little bit more mature, what we're used to, and then they started doing that swing version. But prior to that, like he's in a movie called Till the Clouds Roll By.
Right.
And and this is in 1946, he sings Old Man River in this film. And I think that is the best version of any person I've ever heard sing Old Man River. Because at the end of that, he has this note that he holds for just a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a chance to look it up, you look up Old Man River, Sinatra 1946, Till the Clouds Roll By, and you hear this young, skinny Sinatra singing that. I mean, he held that note a long time at the end of that song.
Mm-hmm.
But I think after that hemorrhage and his vocal cords were restored, it changed.
Yeah.
And he was still fantastic in his singing, but I think that as a young man before this accident in his life, I think he was the greatest singer in those crooner years. Some may say Bing Crosby, but see, the generation we have today, they're not going to know necessarily Sinatra or Bing Crosby, so. But
Well, I think
for my money, Sinatra as a
yeah,
young man.
Sinatra's still in there because I mean, you go to a place like Hastings,
Uh-huh.
and they've got a box set of Sinatra that's unbelievable.
Yeah, but it's usually the older Sinatra when his voice was more mature when they were doing the swing
Well,
stuff.
yeah, but they included his early stuff.
Yeah, his early stuff is just unbelievable. It's just
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Right.
And on that note, as far as Frank Sinatra, ladies and gentlemen, I want to change the subject for a moment and talk about this brand new Lawrence Welk show that I've been doing since July of this year. It was shot at the Governor's Ballroom on the 29th of September. And once again, I want to thank the Alps Corporation for making that possible. We had some guest stars on there, like Joe Sullivan came up from Billings to be part of this show. And Robin Elaine Dent and Chris Foster were part of the show. And our featured artist was Maya Wynn, 17-year-old Maya Wynn. She was just a fantastic young singer. And of course, our extra special guest was the Honorable Mayor John Ingen. He was part of the show, so it was fun having the mayor on this show. This show was taped already, and it will air October 29th on this MCAT station, channel 189 and 190. And if you don't get that on your cable service, you can go to mcat.org on your computer and see the show there. So it'll be on the computer simultaneously when it airs on this MCAT station. It'll be 9 o'clock Montana time.
Okay, So you're gonna have a simulcast.
Yeah,
on
it'll
the-
be, yeah.
on the computer.
And like I shared with our viewing audience, what I'm attempting to do is introduce this show nationally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I've already started the process, and if NBC or ABC or CBS picks this show up, then I want to do some shows locally here on a national level.
Right.
And the name of this program is called Music with Asaph, and the premise, it's a remake update of the Lawrence Welk Show. So everything we do on this show will be in tradition with Lawrence Welk, with ladies having the gowns and the guys having the suits and the tuxedos and things like that.
Well, believe it or not, Lawrence Welk still has a big following.
Yeah, I'm just doing the next generation. Just think of this as Lawrence Welk, the next generation. Imagine having, say, a rock and roll singer come on with a beautiful gown singing Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time, modern stuff, or even a Madonna song in a beautiful gown, or a Neil Diamond song,
Right.
but in the Welk style. I think that'll be fun.
Well, a lot of people, again, what happens with the TV is you get a nostalgia.
Yeah.
And people want to return to those times.
And that's what I'm attempting to do with this new Lawrence Welk show, Music with Asaph. I'm going to attempt to bring that back. I think it's time. And I'm really humbled that I got the opportunity to create this show
Right.
and to host this show.
I think you'll do a good job.
Yeah, so it's been recorded, it's being edited now, and it'll air again on the 29th of this month. And then it'll repeat on November 1st at 5 o'clock our time.
There you go.
So again, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have channels 189 and 190 on your cable, depending on the service you have, you can just get on your laptop, computer, and go to mcat.org and click Watch Now, and you'll be able to see my brand new television show, Music with Asaph. And I have a hostess too, Louise Bundy. She is the hostess, and she's also a professional ballet teacher.
Right.
And she did a routine on this show, which I think the audience will love. She
Great.
put on a ballerina outfit, and I was playing Nadia's theme, and it worked.
Good. Good. Very good.
And we're just about winding down, and again, our guest is John Kramer. He's our guest for Asaph Cafe, and I'm going to play one last song. I'm going to play
Alright.
Nadia's theme.
Okay.
And,
That'll be kind of an introduction to Music with Asaph.
Yes, Music with Asaph.
I think it'd be really something to catch.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, Luis is not here, obviously, but I can still play the song, so let's do this real quick. go.
All
Not
right,
his thing.
very nice.
It's a beautiful
I will
song.
applaud you here in your cafe.
Thank you. And again, John Kramer is my guest for this session of Asaph Cafe. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, and until our next show along with John, Maranatha. Don't do a little fade out on that chord. I always freeze on that chord. Well, thank you. That was
You're
fun.
welcome.
That was fun. We'll get this edited and I'll try to get you a copy of it.
All right. When will this air? And there's going to be another.
Yeah, I'm going to do another taping here in a little bit. I'm going to
Okay.
change clothes and do
Right.
another taping.
Okay. Now, will that be two different shows?
Yeah, they're two different
Okay,
shows.
All right. And so, what day are you usually on?
Well, I tape these shows every Thursday from 1 till 4. I do 2 tapings a week,
Right. And when do they air?
probably about a week or so later.
Okay.
So you'll be able to see it. I'm just going to have this edited and get the credits
Right.
on it. But I'm going to try to give you a copy before you leave here. I think that's possible to do that.
Okay. Have you had any on before? I mean, how many? Have you
Yeah,
had
in
on?
fact, if we go in the front room, I'll show you what it looks like on the computer. They've
Okay.
already been posted.
All right.
Let's go and I'll just leave all this here. We just leave that there.
Okay.
They'll fade all that out. Let's get this finalized so I don't lose it like I did last
Okay,
week.
yeah, don't want that.
Done. You're gonna love that set. If you look on that screen here, you can see the set that I planned for you. All right.
That helps so you don't want to lose something. You put its name on it.
Okay, I
The
have.
common practice.
Yes, I know. Wait there, don't leave, John. Don't leave.
That looks great.
I love that scene. That's
Yeah,
what
you got the
finalizes.
restaurant.
Yeah, I got the candelabra, everything.